Hey everybody, welcome to We've Got Ward, a Doof Media podcast series where we expertly dissect and discuss Ward, Wildbow's return to the world of Parahumans. My name is Matt Freeman, and this is my adorable refrigerator tongue fetus, Scott Daly.
This is the weekly podcast where Matt and I eagerly dive into Wildbow's world of face-hugging fetusi, dorky yet surprisingly loyal mercenaries, and alien-based death powers as we analyze and interpret this ongoing web serial. This week we continue Arc 11, Blinding, with 11.6 and 11.7. Victoria, Rain, and company continue through the sewer to Love Lost's place, where they get some intel, some money, some drugs, and, for Parian, some neat nose fetuses. Then the gang battle begins in earnest with the Capes taking on Nursery, Lord of Loss, and his whole gang of powered and non-powered people. Matt, what did you think about these two chapters?
Well, this is horror. This is just horror.
Yep.
It's great. We were talking earlier about how we were just delighted at how disturbing this was, which is a strange mental space to be in, but you're reading it and you're grossed out and disturbed and simultaneously kind of gleeful at the fact that it's affecting you that much. Just really fun. Mean,
yep. The act of reading this actually made me sick. So I've been sick for the past 3 days, and it's all because of these words.
Yeah, it's interesting because Weld potentially dumping Sveta made me sick. And apparently it took nose fetuses to make you sick. So we're both susceptible to different things. And then of course, there's mixed in with this horror is a really awesome Cape fight. So, a lot of action, a lot of imagery in these chapters. These aren't going to be chapters where we're necessarily, I think, drilling down into like character interactions on a microscopic level, because the thing to focus on in these chapters, the things the chapters are mostly trying to convey are kind of the tension. The tension is almost not a strong enough word. Just the insane level of horror that is pervasive in these scenes.
Yeah, I completely agree with that. And, whenever we get to like heavy battle chapters, I think we always say this thing, and this might be a shorter episode than normal. And by shorter, I mean like just slightly under 2 hours instead of over 2 hours. But there's a lot of subtextual stuff going on here too that I really want to dive into. I'm really continually fascinated by the Rain-Victoria relationship and a lot of the unsaid stuff that appears to be going on with Victoria's feelings towards Rain. I think we're going to dive into that specifically a few times as we go through these two chapters. So still a lot to talk about, even though there's just a lot of cool / creepy action.
Yeah, no, I agree with that. It's not that there's not a lot going on the character level. It's more like that is backgrounded. Yeah. But we're going to talk about it anyway, because that's kind of the point. So let's get on into it. As everyone probably recalls, we decided that we are going to keep doing the discussion questions section, but we're going to move it to the end of the podcast. So right now we're just going straight into chapter 11.6.
Yeah.
And this chapter begins with Victoria focusing on Nursery's discordant music box ambience as musical accompaniment. And she's thinking about like how it's been a long time since she used musical accompaniment in her Cape life, and how she used to wear headphones. And I just love this kind of wordplay where she's thinking, "Mom, I put a stop to that. Situational awareness was too important," she'd said. And then like a paragraph later, situational awareness was in full effect now.
Yeah.
Which is, I love that, because it's not exactly saying like I'm scared shitless, but it's conveying I'm scared shitless.
Right. I really love it. Like I love the ambiance of starting the chapter off with this creepy music. Like you said at the beginning of the show, these are horror chapters. That's the tone they're going for here, mixed in with the action. And we start that off with this creepy nursery music, and it's just like we kind of get what we're doing immediately with that. Yeah. I'm glad you pulled out the Carol reference here specifically, though, because, ever since we had that one comment a few weeks ago that was talking about, that Victoria's relationship with her mother is like kind of two-sided, where when she remembers her doing mom things, it's usually in anger. But when she remembers her doing coaching / prepping for superhero-ness or advice or guidance in that regard, it's usually not attached to a real kind of resentment. because she actually, I think, on some level values her mom's cape advice. It fits into her whole nerdy cape things. And this is kind of in the middle for me, right? Because like the phrase mom had put a stop to that. There's a little feeling of resentment in the subtext of that to me.
Yeah, right. Just the phrasing of it, right? Because it could have been like, mom had suggested that I stop that because it was dangerous, but it was it's mom. Like it's almost saying like mom put her foot down and came down hard on me or whatever. Like it's got a kind of finality and forcefulness to it.
Yeah, and the way the second sentence is written as well. Situal awareness was too important, she'd said. I just feel like it'd be so different if the sentence was, she'd said situal awareness was too important. Like the she'd said being put on the end of that chapter like makes you really think that like this is not something I actually believed at the time and maybe don't really buy into right now.
Yeah, that's great because I almost want to take like a writing exercise where I write that like pair of sentences like 7 different ways to try to see how many different subtextual things I can convey using practically the same words. Because like you're exactly right that it's difficult for me for us to even pin down why, like what, there's no particular word in the sentence that is making me think that this is a memory of of Carol being stern, but it absolutely comes across. Yeah. I think it's how the sentences are broken up, like you said. Right.
Yeah,
but, yeah, it's pretty cool.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's kind of what I love about what language can do sometimes is you can convey that information you don't have to draw specific attention to it. It's just kind of there and how you write and organize and punctuate the sentence.
Yeah.
One more thing before we move on, though. I like here that Victoria refers to Glory Girl in the third person here. When she says Glory Girl had worn headphones for a little while, she hadn't been one to have back and forth with the small fry she was taking down. And this is like not the first time Victoria's like othered Glory Girl as a different person, but she's not consistent with it, right? Sometimes she says specifically, when I was Glory Girl, when Glory Girl was me, she takes ownership of that personality of that part of her life, and sometimes she kind of otherizes it. And I just like that inconsistency kind of goes back and forth. To me, it's like a great way to represent her ever-changing, conflicted uncertainty about her identity of who she is. And it's just fun that you can send that feeling out to your readers just via the changing nature of how she looks at her past.
Yeah, absolutely. I agree with you that it's, for one thing, it's communicating this idea that she's waffling back and forth on how she views her past self. And I think also it's an indicator of like, in this moment, she feels like she's a different person than she used to be. And maybe in other moments, she doesn't actually feel that way. She identifies with that person. And I think it's, you could probably just kind of dig into that forever. This idea that, depending on the context, depending on the mood, even she might literally view that old self as a different person for all kinds of reasons. Like she essentially had a different flesh body back then, for one thing. So yeah, I agree that's a great touch that stood out to me too.
Yeah, great.
So yeah, Victoria warns the team not to touch the walls as they race down the storm drain tunnel. She explains some of Nursery's power, and she says, yeah, it's a true reality overwrite. It's a strong, like really strong shaker power. It's probably more like Labyrinth than anything that we've seen. I don't know if we've really seen any shakers that are quite this, I don't know, just thorough in what they're doing. But she hesitates to tell the group what happens if you touch the walls, and the heartbroken are downright offended that she would think that anything could scare them.
Yeah, and one of the things we're doing here is we're playing this very slow build-up to the reveal of what Nursery's power actually is, which really helps increase like the tension and horror and fear that the readers have for what the hell this is going to be. But the thing that I find most interesting here is it leads this accusation that the heartbroken are going to be afraid leads to this horrible story from them about like details into what their father used to do to them. Fear for breakfast, they say. Anytime he wanted them to leave him alone, they made them deathly afraid. Anytime they wanted them to do chores or do something for him, they made them as happy as a kid on Christmas morning, is the way they describe it. It's just, emotional manipulation that basically serves as mind control. And the text notes that it makes Victoria's skin crawl. She's so disturbed by it. And of course that makes sense because that's, losing control of her own decision-making process, losing control of her emotional, thought processes, something that Victoria would have a serious problem with. So it makes sense that it makes her skin crawl. But this is this is the first beat to me in many throughout this chapter where we're exploring Victoria being very disturbed or annoyed or angry about emotional manipulating powers. Well, all of them, but her own, that is, which is the weird thing that we see throughout this chapter is she's continually annoyed at the Heartbroken's emotional powers. She gets angry at Rain for his powers, is relatively unaware or unquestioning about her role in, her emotional powers affecting other people.
Yeah, she seems quite blind to it, and I think it's like a motivated kind of blindness, honestly, because she doesn't want to face up to the consequences of thinking about it. I really like that you pulled out that the fact that her skin crawled when the Heartbroken were telling their story, because I mean, she's the only one at this point who knows how creepy her situation is. She's running down this like already creepy storm drain that's gradually transforming into a creepy nursery that she knows there's organic fetus monsters on the other side of the wall. And the thing that makes her skin crawl isn't the situation she's in. It's hearing a story about somebody using emotion manipulation / mind control on someone. And that's the perfect way of underlining how sensitive this character is to that kind of thing. While also kind of highlighting how like mentally tough she is otherwise, right? Because I would be shitting my pants if I were in her situation.
Yeah, that's true.
But she's just like, yeah, I mean, we got to problem solve our way out of it.
Yeah.
Yeah. So Victoria elaborates. She's kind of like doling out the information to everyone in tiny chunks. She elaborates that there are living things behind the walls if you accidentally break through them, but she still withholds the worst bit and won't really say like what the living things are.
Yeah, and like I said, this is us kind of slowly ramping up the tension and the fear and the uncertainty around this power. I like we're going to get into this in a bit, but I like that not only is this doled out to us, the audience, for reasons of tension, but I like that when we get to the in-universe, in-story explanation for why Victoria is not just telling them what's going on, I think it's very satisfying, and it doesn't just feel like a narrative contrivance to make us more afraid.
Yeah. I don't know if there's a right place to talk about this, so I might as well talk about it now. The idea that Nursery's power has been planted in our head as something to be worried about since the first arc, since the first handful of chapters. Yeah. We had Victoria go into her domain. Everything is super, super creepy. There's squelching things inside little baby prams and rose colored light and just all kinds of creepiness. And then she just says, fuck this, and books it. And that's like, and that's been just like gestating in our mind, like some sort of horrible fetus, for months now. And so it's really interesting because like, I have no idea how much that's actually influencing my level of anticipation on the one hand, but also kind of dread, in finding out what is going on here exactly.
Yeah, that's a really good point. It's interesting because this fight in general is almost like a full circle thing, right? You're like Lord of Loss and Nursery are two characters that we met at the very beginning of the story. It's the first Kate battle was against these two and some others, but these two. And now we've kind of come full circle, and we left that battle with like, I'm not going to call it like a begrudging respect, but like they definitely were not like going to actually like hurt each other. Like it was still very much in the parameters of the old cops and robbers game, right? And now we're 11 arcs later, and we're going to have this big battle between them. And it certainly seems like that is less so now. It seems it's more chaotic, more disgusting, more disturbing, more intense, more dangerous than it was 10 arcs ago. And I think that circling back and fighting these same two people again kind of demonstrates how bad things have gotten since the story started.
Yeah, there's another symmetry here, which is that in that fight, she was fighting Snag, and maybe the hardest part for her about that fight was that he kept hitting her with these emotion blasts that were bringing back to her loss. This idea of loss. Snag's not here because Snag's dead, but Rain is here, and now she is struggling a little bit with this, with his presence, basically, with his flickering of his emotion power. That's annoying her. And I can't help but think that that's an intentional parallel. We've got Lord of Loss, we've got Nursery, and we've got somebody from the mall cluster poking her in the eye with emotion powers. I think that's there on purpose.
I think you're absolutely right. I mean, remember we like segmented this team off, right? Like Victoria went with Rain for a reason. We didn't just pair them off. Just it'd be fun if we paired them off. We're doing a lot of stuff with that.
Yeah, absolutely. So Rain is doing a lot of tinker scanning in these chapters. He's using tech that is either borrowed from or adapted from Kinsey's and probably also Chris's. He hints. I just wanted to kind of point this out because tinker scanning is a thing we know that tinkers can do, but he's just like constantly doing that in this chapter.
Yeah, it's something new for him. And I think like one of the reasons why we split off Victoria with Rain is because we're going to zoom in on Rain a little bit here in these few chapters. And one of the things we're doing is seeing him take a more involved, active, responsible role in the things that are going on, or at least we're allowing Victoria to see these things. Because I think we're going to talk about this a little later, but one of the things that has happened is Rain like had his big moment early in the book in arc 5-ish, I think it was. And then he's kind of drifted to the background of the team since then. And this team up allows both Victoria and us to kind of zoom in on him and check up with him and see how he's doing. And part of what we get to see is that he's being more involved. He's being more active. Like throughout both of these chapters, he does a lot of stuff, both in the fighting and just in quick thinking, problem solving outside of the combat itself.
Yeah, I think this is great that this is happening. I mean, I think it's, It's not that Rain hasn't been a presence in the story, but we've joked a few times recently, and even the text kind of jokes like, "Oh, Rain, he's just like the butt of every joke, and he sucks." and it's almost sort of like reached meme status, and like this is the perfect time now to say, okay, but Rain's not a meme; he's a character. We're gonna remind everyone that like things have been going on with him in the background while Victoria hasn't really been paying too much attention to him. I think that's great. So while they're making their way through this tunnel, Victoria brings up Rain's egregious overuse of his emotion power. So interestingly, he describes it as a shame and regret power, which is interesting because Victoria seems to experience it as like doubt and uncertainty and second guessing.
Yeah. She doesn't like correct him though or anything, right? Like she doesn't hear this and go, "That's not what I feel when you use it." She just kind of lets that slide. So it could just be like a difference in perception, or him not fully understanding it or whatever. But I think this is the introduction of our big thing for these two chapters, right? This is something we've been slowly building up to for the past arc and a half almost, it seems like, that Rain has an emotional aura and he's been using it a lot more lately, and starting to annoy Victoria a bit here. And I think like what this is doing, I think, to me, it not only is this a way of addressing Rain's aura and Victoria's frustration with that, I think this is kind of possibly maybe a backdoor way of discussing Victoria's aura and the things that are going on with that. I think that's where we're going to eventually get to with this, possibly, because what I find most interesting about this whole thing is that it's not that Victoria's wrong here. I think she's absolutely right. He needs better control of his aura. It's fucking his teammates up a little. But she just seems entirely ignorant of the effect of her aura as it comes to friendly fire. Like we've consistently throughout the story been given clues by her teammates that her aura isn't quite working the same way that it used to, that something's changed with it. But it's like she doesn't really seem interested in exploring that change or figuring out like what's at the bottom of it or how it's actually working. And that's very interesting for a cape nerd like Victoria that really likes to understand how powers work and what's going on there. She's kind of just seemingly indifferent. I think she's consciously avoiding dealing with it. And she's just carrying on using it in the same way she always used it, even though there's some kind of underlying change here that's going on. It's a little different. And I think this is our way, while also exploring Rain and exploring Victoria and Rain's relationship. It's a way of kind of getting to maybe discussing her aura and what's going on there.
Yeah, I mean, it took her arcs to like kind of look directly at her wretch force field power and even get to the point where she would try to use it in ways that weren't just like pretending that it was the same as it used to be. And I think with her aura, she's actually still in that place, basically still pretending it's the same way it used to be, at least when it comes to how she fights. And I was thinking about this, like, it's hard to imagine because I've never been hit by an emotion manipulation power, but like it would be really confusing if you were in combat and one of your allies suddenly became extremely terrifying to you. Like that would throw you off and mess up your strategy or whatever you were thinking, just as much as like suddenly having kind of a vague creeping doubt or regret or whatever. And yeah, like you said, Victoria doesn't think about the friendly fire implications. She's just like kind of brushes it off usually.
Yeah. I think we get one line in the second chapter of this week's where she says, use my aura on the bad guys and minimize its effects on the good guys, where she like acknowledges that it is having an effect on her team. But it doesn't seem to change her strategy very much, or at least not consciously. She's not spelling it out in the text.
Yeah.
Especially glaring when we compare like how angry she gets at Rain for his use of his.
Yeah, right. I'm trying to remember the only instance I can think of where we saw what her power felt like from someone else's point of view was when she uses it on Jessica in Jessica's interlude in Worm. I can't think of any other instance, but just remembering that, it seemed like super distressing to have it used on you. So yeah, I'm definitely something that needs to be paid attention to. Yeah,
the only use of it in this story we've seen is, or the effects have been people explaining to Victoria how it feels, right? Like we had Kenzie kind of describe it, and we had Damsel the gritting her teeth thing last week, which is like, yeah, it's fine.
Yeah, right.
So yeah, we're seeing little hints and little bits of information about this thing. I would expect us to get some to zoom in on this eventually, and I think this is kind of like we're dealing with emotional powers a lot here. We've got, I mean, look at our team here. We've got a bunch of Heartbroken. We've got Rain. We've got Victoria. They're all here. All of them have emotion-based powers. We're exploring the idea of emotion-based powers right here. So
yeah, what's funny is that she is. I don't know if she actually. Well, yeah, I think we'll get there in just a second, actually. So I'll save this comment. So they pass through areas that are more thoroughly infested with Nursery's power, and there are like huge, wet, moving things behind the walls, and everything is thudding with a uniform heartbeat. After some sexual innuendo with the Heartbroken, which is just so perfectly well placed here, Victoria confesses that the living things in the walls are full of parasites. And they're like, oh, it's going to infect us. And she's like, basically infection. Sure.
So yeah, first, this is beat number 2 of Chastity identifying well-endowed capes. We're going to see another beat of this in the next chapter. But yeah, this is... So she's lying, right? And she immediately gets called out on that lie by the Heartbroken Candy. It's great because like we're really building up why she is not saying this, and her excuse has been throughout all this time that like I don't want to freak these kids out. I don't want to freak these kids out. A little beat here that I loved is when Candy calls her out on lying. Her response is, "Fucking fucker emotion readers. The ones who weren't Dean sucked."
Yeah.
And once again, that's her kind of segmenting Dean out of a thing where I have a hard time believing she's that annoyed by emotion readers and never was annoyed by her boyfriend's ability to read her emotions. I'm sure that's not true. That's him kind of back on the pedestal again.
Yeah, I mean, it's funny because even like Victoria's, it's not like she doesn't swear, but fucking fucker is pretty harsh for her, right?
Yeah.
And with like she's not saying fucking fucker people with emotion powers, because that would be her.
Yeah, right.
She's narrowly focusing in on people who can read emotions, as if that's somehow worse than what she does.
Yeah. And it's so interesting here because, like, when she gets called out on this, which turns out to just be Candy, making up the fact that she read her via emotion powers when she didn't, which is wonderful.
Yeah.
But Rain is immediately like, Victoria, what the hell? Like, I need to know what's going on here. Like, I'm trying to, like, collect data and understand what's going on here. Why, like, and it is very, intentionally surprising because Victoria's thing is communicating, right? Is making sure everyone's fully aware of the situation. And she's just really, really holding this one back. And we find out here in a few minutes why that is.
Yeah. I really like this moment, actually, when Rain does kind of snap at her and kind of breaks out of his typical Eeyore fashion of responding to things.
Yeah.
Where he's like, we're fighting this enemy. I need to understand. And yeah.
Yeah, she's like, I'll tell you when we get back home. And I was like, no, we're like in their territory right now. You can't just say don't touch the walls because something really bad is going to happen. I need to understand what that means.
Right. Yeah. I mean, and I think she's just wrong. Like it. I mean, and it certainly kind of turns out to be the case because they end up having to fight Nursery, and they need to understand how her power works when that happens.
Yeah.
So she finally comes fully clean after being prodded and accused of lying. And she tells them that it's impregnation, which interestingly, she tells them it's impregnation, but this is actually still really vague.
Yeah.
Like it's just like, okay, so something gets into your body somehow. Like it's still vague enough that you, the reader, your imagination just fills in with like the worst possible thing that could be or look like.
Yeah. It's great because like we were like, it's almost scarier to be vague about this stuff than it is to just tell the full truth. And her excuse for not telling the truth here is because she's trying not to scare the heartbroken kids. That's her excuse. We find out here in a second that that's not the real reason. We find out here when Rain finally pesters her enough to give in, she says, I didn't want to talk about it because it bothered me. Mm-hmm. It was not just that I didn't want to scare the kids. It's like, I didn't want to have to think about this stuff. And again, from Victoria's perspective, someone who like drops monstrous fetuses inside you and things that grow inside your body, probably is something that's very triggering for Victoria. I think that makes a lot of sense.
Yeah, but losing bodily autonomy, basically.
Right. But this is classic Victoria, right? Like when things are bothering her and she doesn't want to face them, she pushes them off. She either ignores them, or in this case, she refocuses that discomfort elsewhere. I didn't want to think about Nursery. So the reason for me not doing that is because I don't want to scare the kids. It's the kids. Definitely, even though they've told me that they've experienced horrors like so terrible that kids their age have never experienced, I don't want to tell it to them. And I think the great capper on this is at the end of all this, Candy says, I'm a little scared now, not gonna lie. So it's like her efforts to withhold information to not scare them failed so much that now one of the heartbroken are actually scared.
Yeah.
But it's just like, this is what she does, Matt. Like she doesn't want to deal with something. She pushes it off. She doesn't think about it, or she, refocuses that on something else. And like, I have to think about the whole Weld conversation again, that she still has not thought about in her head. Like it has not crossed her mind once since that conversation ended. And yes, she's in a little bit of a pickle right now. Her thoughts are focused elsewhere, but I still find that very surprising that this big bomb was dropped on her that like made her say fuck like 30 times in a row. And she hasn't focused on that once since then.
Yeah, right. And there was a brief opportunity last week when she was thinking about like Sveta is over there in that other group. That was all she thought. She didn't think like, oh man, it was going to be really awkward when I had to talk to her again, right, and pretend everything was fine, because she doesn't want to, like, I think her mind flinches away from that. So yeah, she doesn't think it. She doesn't, it's too uncomfortable. She's really good at avoiding those thoughts. So yeah, she successfully frightened the heartbroken. Just kind of table setting for the battle that's about to come. Candy describes her power as a hallucination that she can induce that can permanently ruin someone's attachment to things or people.
Yeah, it's like that time I ate some pad thai and got really, really sick, and now I never want to eat pad thai ever again. I want to throw up just thinking about eating pad thai.
Yeah.
It's like that.
It's just like that. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, Candy's power seems awful, Matt. Like really awful. And like this poor kid Nathan that we've gotten these like various beats about how terrible other members of the Heartbroken have been to him. This is the unpowered brother of theirs who has gone through all kinds of shit. Like we know he was tormented by at least 2 other members of the group. And now we learn that he got a full dose of this from Candy. And we know he's like basically non-functional, right? Like he's basically like he's alive, but not there.
Yeah.
And what like he's heartbroken, Matt.
I can't actually in my head count up like what beat number this is, but I'm pretty sure that we have indeed had 2 or 3 beats of Nathan being, I think he was terror waved by someone in a previous. He just. Yeah, so I do wonder if this is just kind of if this is the joke, like poor Nathan, or if we're setting something up.
It can be both. I mean, it's a freaking dark joke, but
yeah,
I mean, like that's what I love about the Heartbroken is we're playing in this area like right in between humor and horror,
right?
And you know, we go over the line one way or the other, but we straddle it constantly. And that's why I think they're just fascinating characters to be around.
Yeah, right. It's a super fun and unique tone. This idea of horror comedy, basically, that we're hitting here.
Yeah.
So speaking of horror, they leave Nursery's area of influence and they bust through a wall into an empty house using Rain's power. The team fans out through the house and they kind of just loot it. Yep. They find a computer. And Rain disarms some minor traps using his scanning tech again. Once again, the chapter making much of Rain scanning stuff. So just kind of as a aside, my theory is that Rain's like gonna be using some of the power scans that he gets in these chapters, and that's why we're focusing on it so much.
Yeah.
But yeah, Rain is able to guess love lost passwords relatively easily based on his tactile memory of her dreams and her memories.
Yeah, and I like went off the deep end trying to look into what these passwords mean before I saw somewhere that it's just a Pact reference, and I was going too deep into this. But yeah, like we talked about before, this chapter is leaning really far into Rain's usefulness on the team. He's scanning stuff, he's identifying and disarming traps, he's using his blight blades as a source and also to get into the place. He's cracking passwords. Like I said before, we have not spent a lot of time with Rain since we had he was the first person we focused on in the story, really. And now we're catching up with him. Victoria's catching up with him. Like Victoria, the coach, almost gets to see Rain in action in these chapters and gauge his progress and offer insights. Like there's the moment where he says, "Oh, I'm so stupid. These things are a brighter light source than my phone." And Victoria's like, "Hey, it's all right. You'll get there." So she's a coaching in that matter. And then we see at the end of the second chapter, she coaches him in a different method that, well, we're going to get there when we talk about it, but it's not as an effective method, I don't think.
Yeah.
But I think one of the other things this does is this focus allows us to kind of catch up with Rain, but I think it allows us to subtextually kind of plant the seeds for some biases towards Rain that Victoria is clearly harboring. And we'll get into this in a bit and talk about it more, but I think this is the most fascinating part about all this for me.
Yeah, I agree. I like that you kind of emphasize that this is maybe, I don't know, not the first time, but this is certainly an arc where we're actually emphasizing that it's kind of nice to have a Swiss Army knife cape, a cluster cape hanging around who can do a bunch of different things. And maybe just a few different, we've seen him use the silver blades to advantage in the past, but here he kind of gets to use all of his powers to a greater or lesser degree.
Yeah.
So Victoria intermittently checks in on the other teams using her little trajectory disky dealy. And she sees that they're all running, but they don't seem to be in an active fight.
Well, that's good, I guess.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
I do like
in danger.
I do like that we cut back to them though, right? Like, we just like intermittently like check back with these teams and see if they're like fully dead or not. I think it allows us to like remind the reader about that there is some sort of like 3-pronged pincer attack happening somewhere, and we still don't know who it's like oh yeah, there's that happening. Like we're dealing with all the stuff with Love Lost or with the Lord of Lost and Nursery and those teams, but we've got this other attack that's happening somewhere or going to happen soon somewhere that we don't know about. And I think those cutback moments where she checks her device is a good way to remind the reader about that.
Yeah. Also, so the glitching thing happened last chapter, right? The first time the glitching thing happened was last chapter. So like now we're there's like some level of anxiety attached to her looking at her little projector dealie because, okay, so my like immediate thought when she looked at her projector and saw that it was glitching and it looked like their body parts were everywhere was one of these times she's going to look at her wrist, see the body parts everywhere, think, oh, it's just glitching again. And it's not going to be glitching. So like that's what I feel like is being set up. So I don't know if you're supposed to guess that or if that's just where my mind went immediately. But in either case, I get like a stab of anxiety every time she looks at the projector.
Yeah, I don't know. We could be intentionally setting that up. I like that idea a lot. I mean, that would be a very classic 3-beat, right? We check, like, because it's happened twice, right? Mm-hmm. So the third beat.
Not sure actually, but yeah.
I'm pretty sure it's happened twice. I mean, she looks at the thing she's looked at the thing more than twice, but the specific, like, they're broken up into pieces glitch that makes her momentarily panic before she, like, her brain catches up with her eyes, has happened twice. So yeah, that would be an interesting way to do it. I mean, and again, we know that power exists out there. We know that Cradle's going to be doing something with that. So yeah, that would be an interesting way to go with it. I like that a lot. Yeah. Yeah.
Well, anyway, even if it wasn't intended, it messed me up. So, so we get to take a deep dive into Love Lost's folder labeling scheme. She's like, has this like interesting kind of abstract labeling scheme of strange words. And so they find personal files and photos, they find Tinker notes, and they find an online wallet which lists tens of thousands of dollars in transactions. So Victoria sabotages the online wallet, which freezes the funds and halts all the transactions. And then she sends a bunch of confusing emails to the mercenaries. So I just love this bit right here. Like this is just awesome, like creative, using her mind, right? She's not smashing anything. She's using her mind to completely throw this enemy into chaos.
Yeah, it's the Breakthrough Cybercrimes Division.
Absolutely.
It's great.
Yeah. I like this moment specifically as just maybe a jumping off point to talk about her attitude toward Rain, because he says he looked at the numbers. Being a villain pays. Considering it, I asked, trying to sound casual, as tense as the overall situation was, as not casual as the possibility of him turning to the wrong side might be. No, he said, it costs too. So like my takeaway from this is like, man, Victoria just does not trust Rain or have a very accurate read on him or a very fair read on him, I think.
No, I think you're right. And I that's what I like that you said using this as a jumping off point, because that's what I really want to talk about here. Victoria is this person that, like, I think has expressed a desire to give up people second chances, right? That, like, she's expressed happiness in the fact that Rain is seeking forgiveness and working towards making up for the bad things that he's done. But underneath all that, she's still that person that doesn't believe in forgive and forget, right? Like, I don't think I think she's slowly changing, but I don't think she's fully changed in that outlook yet. And I think you're right that a lot of how that is expressed towards Rain specifically is this base level of distrust, this base level of frustration and kind of anger at this person that did this terrible thing that she knows about and as you said earlier in the show, has never like maybe fully processed and gone through. Like when she first learned about it, she just flew away, and I don't know if they've ever like had a sufficient like sit down talk about it. Like she just kind of observed him from afar and seen his attempts to get better, and has always been like confused and uncertain in how she feels about that, because on the one time she's like, good, he's trying, but maybe he deserves to feel this way forever, right? And like that back and forth and her feelings of him has been so confusing. And I think like we're seeing that a lot in these chapters, and part of what I think the reason we're seeing the distrust specifically here is Victoria has just like opened up Lovelost's files and seen the pictures that she keeps of her past life, right? And we have this moment where Victoria says, a real person, a person with a past. I shivered. And the text does not specifically draw the thread between seeing Lovelost as a real person and having the guy who is tangentially responsible for the losing of who that person was. But I don't think it has to draw that line because I think it's there, right? Like she's seeing Lovelost as this human being that had this life and went through all this stuff. And here's the guy that did it. Okay, not entirely, right? Like there's a lot of extenuating circumstances there, but here he is and he's on my team. And I don't know how I feel about that.
Yeah. I think you're right. And my brain just like did several logical leaps while you were saying that, because you basically caused me to, and maybe this isn't that creative actually, maybe other people have said this, but just the idea that the powers manifested by the mall cluster, the emotion powers, are basically projecting whatever emotion it is that they're feeling when they're watching each other's dreams.
Yeah.
Kind of like love, when Lovelost watches Rain's dream, she's feeling like hate. When he watches her dreams, he's feeling regret. So it's, yeah, I don't know. It doesn't work perfectly actually, but I guess the reason why I thought of it just now, is this idea of like looking in on Lovelost as a real person is actually something that Rain has to do several times a week. Right.
Right.
Or at least once a week, I guess.
Yeah.
So it messes with Victoria to have to see it that way. But maybe like what she doesn't appreciate about Rain is that it's something that he confronts all the time.
Right.
And it like, this is nothing new to him. He literally has to live out her life routinely.
Yeah. And the hope is here, right, that kind of connection, that realization brings her closer to him, because maybe she understands on some level, you know, what he's going through. Like we had that moment in the last week's reading where she kind of got on his case, like, don't make people hate you. Like, don't go out to make people hate you. And she doesn't fully understand what it's like to be him and have these feelings of regret, have this constant like awareness of how bad the thing that you did was. And maybe this kind of brings her closer to understanding that. So maybe this thing that I think in the moment seems to like make her mistrust him a little bit will hopefully bring them closer together at the end of it.
Yeah, I think you're right. I think, we're definitely setting some stuff up. Can't wait to see how it plays out.
Yeah.
So the most distressing part of these chapters happens now, where she's reading communiques with Lord of Loss, between Lord of Loss and Lovelost. And the text says, I am happy to do this level of work because I trust you. A job done is reputation. Success-oriented emoji. Get the job done, get the pay, build rapport. Other emoji, LOL. My thinker has a good feeling about this. Another weird little emoticon. Wow, I whispered. That's more horrifying than Nursery's power.
I like that we can make jokes.
Yeah. So this section irrevocably changed my perception of Lord of Lost. So bravo with that.
Yeah, I'm happy that someone with the name LOL is just as goofy as I hoped they would be. You know, my niece, Matt, just got her first email account ever. And she's been like sending emails to me like every other day, basically. And she really likes using emoji. Like each sentence in her email is finished by some sort of emoji. And she's 8. So like this is what this reminded me of as I was reading it. Like this 8-year-old girl that just like is contacting people for the first time and just loves it and has access to all these emoji and she's loving using them. And it just like I think we're pretty like Lord of Lost is like a 30-year-old man, right? Because we saw him in I think the time camera showed what his human form looked like, and he was like a 30-something guy, but he's just so dorky. Yeah,
it's funny because like, I mean, his power makes him so formidable seeming, but like that is kind of the perfect thing that powers would do, is like make you into like a giant badass monster creature. Like to like sort of compensate, but simultaneously calcify the fact that you're a huge nerd.
Right.
Trying to remember, it's like I think isn't it'll come to me. Juggernaut, isn't Juggernaut actually like a nerd when he's not wearing his helmet? Anyway, it doesn't matter.
I don't remember.
Yeah, it doesn't really matter, but it kind of reminds me of that. Yeah, so that's pretty awesome. So importantly, we see Lovelost's communications with other capes. First, we learn that she needs to kill 2 capes, and only one of them being Rain, of course.
Yeah, so then, I mean, who's the other one, right? Like, I think Cradle is the most obvious choice, and that's the one that they kind of indicate here in the text itself. But something in Rain's response makes me really doubt that, and it seems so obvious that I don't think it would be that. I guess the possibility is Seer, right? Like finally turning your attention to the actual fallen member that started the fire, which, I mean, would make sense, but it would kind of be too rational to the point where I kind of doubt it. Like if she really wanted to get revenge on the people that did this to her, yes, Rain, absolutely. You're like put in a situation where you have to experience his view of this thing every few days. I get why you'd want to take out Rain, but like, wouldn't you want to completely dismantle all of the Fallen too, as like the representatives of like this happening?
Yeah, I mean, they were the ones who ordered this to happen, right? It is definitely irrational to specifically want to take out the 15 or 16-year-old kid who was part of the terrorist attack and just gloss over the fact that the terrorist attack was ordered and also conducted by entirely other and more like objectively evil people. But I mean, it's fair to say she's not being rational about this anyway. So
sure.
And I mean, they did try to attack the Fallen and it just wasn't successful. So it's possible that she's just like, I tried. Although that doesn't seem like her attitude either. I feel like she would be a bulldog about it. So it really leaves you wondering who the other person is.
Yeah, I mean, one of the things we've seen, this is like the second time we've done it now. First we did it with Disjoint, and now we do it with Rain, where they look at this idea of a love lost post revenge gained. And like, I think she says here is like, once I kill these 2 people, once I get my revenge, the fire will die down. I'm going to go to some other world and just be in peace. And like Disjoint, Rain looks at that and says, I don't buy it. I don't buy it. That doesn't seem like love lost. So, I mean, there's a possibility that one of the other 2, she's referring specifically to herself, that she knows that this rage will never be sated and is just going to remove herself from the board once she's gotten her revenge or something. That's possible. I don't know. Mm-hmm. It's all very interesting. And I think we're definitely doing something with this idea of a love lost, who will never be satisfied. Like we're seemingly pushing towards that very specifically.
Yeah. That's been implanted.
Yeah.
It makes me wonder if that almost ties into the next thing, which is that she is one of the people who seems to know or believe that the city is lost. And this is not because any thinker told her. It's because Snag's ghost told her.
Right.
And it's just wonderfully creepy. I mean, we're just getting so much wonderful horror in these chapters. And this is completely separate from all the other horror that we've been seeing. Yeah. But she's saying in her creepy all caps way of communicating, but my partner Snag tries to communicate. I listen. He is far away and he is close, dead and alive. He shouts at me from the bottom of a well filled with the power of a destroyed alien world, and I hear echoes of whispers. He says the city is doomed, and he tries to explain why, and I know it is true. And then, fuck me, Precipice said. You're saying that a lot. Fuck a lot of this. I nodded. So, first of all, that's funny. A funny little kind of like counterpoint to the existential horror. But also, fuck me is Victoria's thing. Yeah. And she's criticizing him for saying it. How much more of a fucking hypocrite can you be, Victoria?
Sorry, we'll see.
I'm going to take a laugh. I'm going to walk off.
No, but because the answer is she can be more of a fucking hypocrite, because we're going to get that in a bit. But I think what this is doing again is like bringing us back around to this Cape Afterlife idea, right? Like the moment when Snag died, he had this realization that he's not he's not ceasing to exist. He's going somewhere else. And we've also had this idea with that Broken Trigger event, this idea of like dead capes returning to the source, quote unquote, right? They're not dying. They're not ceasing to exist. They're going back to the source of their power. And obviously, Snag is communicating to her through this. And the interesting part about this to me is Rain's reaction to it, right? Because like if we didn't have Rain's specific like surprised fuck me reaction to this, the assumption that I would have is that Snag's post-death communication must be occurring within their dream room, and that therefore if it's occurring via the dream room, then I would assume that Rain would be able to hear and or like be aware of Snag's communication as well. But it doesn't based on his response here, it doesn't seem like that's true. So there's a lot of questions going on here, like to the point where like I really hope we get another Rain cluster interlude sometime soon, because I want to see what that dream room looks like. I want to see what Snag's section looks like if it matches the mysterious fifth section of the room, like if it's dark just like that one is, or what it looks like, and how what's happening inside that room, because we haven't been in there in a long time.
Yeah, great points. Yeah, I don't know if I even thought about any of that stuff, but that's I'm excited to find out what's going on there too.
Yeah.
So the Heartborked discuss stealing the big bags of money and the drugs that they find.
Yeah, and Victoria seems grudgingly okay with that. She's like, yeah, that would really hurt her to take this money and cocaine, even though I think it's Candy that's like, I get to try cocaine.
Yeah.
Well, it's not exactly okay, I get to try opiates.
Yeah. Right.
Hooray.
Yeah, Victoria's like, well, I guess you're villains anyway, and I'm working with villains, so whatever.
But it is interesting that there's one thing that's too far for her, right? They're taking the computer, so they're taking all her family photos, but she leaves Love Lost a note saying, look, we want to talk. We're not going to like take your family photos from you. We will send them back to you if you meet with us. And it's kind of beat of kindness here, as she's like secretly wondering to herself if Love Lost is going to be one of those that they're going to have to force to disappear. And I just find that really interesting that like to me, it's the central like conflicted nature of what's going on in Victoria right now, is that like she recognizes that they might have to do this frankly disturbing thing where they just act like kind of unilaterally to disappear people. But she's also recognizing her as a human being still.
Yeah, I think at this point she would still much rather Love Lost like back off and stop making a problem for her, which is fully within character and really a rather noble perspective. I do think that Victoria does not like understand what an unhinged and dangerous person Love Lost is actually.
Yeah.
And I think part of that is that she sees her as a victim and identifies with her a little bit, I think.
Yeah, I think you're right. One of the things that's really interesting about that to me is as I think about, how this plays out and what the themes of the story is, when you look back at Worm was this book with a lot of like moral quandaries in it, right? Like doing what is right, what is wrong in these situations. But the main character of Worm was a character that was very quickly able to deal with that kind of moral grayness and just pick the thing they wanted to do and go. That was like Taylor never really wrestled with these moral issues. She just like did it. We have Victoria here in this book, who is a character that wants to really exist in this black and white world, wants to really be the person that is just like, I am good, I am representative of good, I'm going to do good. And she's being confronted with this grayness, and her reaction to it is very different from the protagonist in the last book, because she has much more difficulty making those decisions. And I think it's interesting that like forcing Taylor into making a morally gray decision and forcing Victoria into making a morally gray decision are very, very different things. And the characters have very different reactions to them. And I think like we're getting to see like the idea of, okay, what is a hero that wants to do good? How is this world going to destroy them? Because like that's not really what we did with Taylor, right? Like because her reaction to that kind of grayness was just so different from what Victoria is. And so I think about this idea that yes, she doesn't want to disappear Love Lost. In Victoria's ideal world of black and white, she's able to save Love Lost, this person that she sees as a victim now, and redeem her and prevent her from doing bad without having to do anything bad herself. But that's not the world they live in. And seeing her deal with the truth of that, I think is going to be very interesting.
Yeah, no, I really like that comparison between the characters. It gives me a lot to think about. I don't know if it even have anything too sharp to say about it right now, but there's definitely Taylor had a heroic streak, but you could go into great detail about the ways in which these two characters who have strong heroic streaks are quite actually incompatible in terms of like why they are heroes and the way their heroism manifests.
Yeah.
And you can imagine them reacting, like even when she was Weaver, you can imagine the two of them reacting to a situation in very different ways.
Yeah.
So yeah, that's great.
Well, it's just the idea that, you know, between the two books, like the moral quandary in Worm was never our protagonist dealing with making a difficult moral decision because she was just able to do that. The moral quandary in Worm was us, the reader, saying, ugh, I'm not sure about that.
Was that too far?
Yeah. Whereas in this book, I think it's much more the protagonist going, ugh, I'm not sure what the right move here is. And that is an interesting change.
Yeah, I love it. So yeah, here we have another beat. Victoria hangs back, and I backed off, pulling up the disc to check the status of the other groups. Bodies in pieces. It still made my heart skip a beat. So this is wonderful horror. Victoria, you know, reacting to this and it disturbs us. This is what makes me think like she's going to see the bodies in pieces and be like, oh, okay, well that's fine. And then it's not going to be fine. But yeah, so next thing that happens, Victoria hears the heartbeat indicating that a region of Nursery's power has stabilized in the closet nearby, which warns them that Nursery's power lingers, but it doesn't warn them fast enough to avoid the fridge banging open and a giant tongue grabbing Parian around the face. This
is a wonderfully suspenseful piece of writing. We have the slow buildup of a whole chapter of nursery nonsense of what is this? Like, how is this? This is so horrifying. It scared Victoria. What is it? What is it? And we think we've maybe escaped it. And then suddenly she's back, or rather her effect is back. And it's, of course, a closet under the stairs. Of course, it's a monster in a closet under the stairs. That's perfect. But then, surprise, the attack comes not from the front, but from the sides, from the refrigerator monster you didn't even know was there. And it face hugs Parian, and you're just like, what? Uh-huh. What?
Yeah. And the thing is, we still don't really know what's going to happen. Like, we just know, impregnation. And of course, it's far more horrifying than anyone dare imagine. So the thing attaches to her face. The group is able to cut the giant thing apart and keep it from tearing Parian's head off in the process. But it's already threaded umbilicals and vessels into her orifices, her ears, her nasal cavity, down her throat. They pull a huge grub out of her throat, followed by a string of smaller ones. Makes you wonder, like, what is the next step in this like life cycle we're witnessing? And they manage to tear up the inside of Parian's like throat and mucous membranes as they're doing this.
Yeah, this is some of the most visually disturbing writing I've ever read in my entire life, and I loved it. I loved it so much. I love body horror. Like, I really, it's inventive and disgusting and gross in that weird kind of pleasurable way. And every time I read something like this, I feel bad for that one guy that talked about how much they hated body horror. I don't think they did very well with this chapter. But I mean, look at this writing. Like, at her ear, a tiny umbilical cord threaded to a calloused quarter-sized lump of flesh with a nascent leg attached. At her nose, a hand was extending from a nostril, fingers twitching. It is amazing how things that you will never actually see with your own eyes in real life can be conveyed in a way in which you have the image of it in your head instantly. Like, this image of a little baby hand poking out of a nostril is an image I will never be able to get out of my head. And I think it's just fantastic that is conveyed so quickly and so impactfully that you like are horrified in all the right ways.
Yeah, I agree. It's really good descriptive writing when like, because I was not like, man, I want to see a picture of this. No part of me was like, I want to see a picture of this. I have no problem picturing this just fine, and in fact, might even prefer my mental image to really any visual depiction of it because I don't know, if it's in your imagination, it's so much more like it's immediate. Yeah. It's great.
Yeah, it's really great. And it's just starting.
Yeah, it is. That's true. So Lord of Loss and Nursery are already arrived outside by the time they can get out of the building, and it's on.
It's time for a cape battle.
Yep. So 11.7 begins. Victoria opens up by trying to buy off Lord of Loss and, referencing the fact that, she's not going to pay you. It's all a trap. But of course, it's not really the case. It's a trick. But anyway, he refuses because he's clearly completely insane.
Completely insane, or the most loyal mercenary who ever lived.
Yes.
Yeah, okay, he's probably your one. But still, if you need to hire a guy, this is the guy.
Yeah. I mean, he's good at his job.
He's going to send you a lot of emoji emails, though.
Yeah. You gotta work through that part. So, yep, big old cape fight commences. Fate cape. Foil uses her bolts to pin people into place, starting with Lord of Loss's limbs. LOL doesn't seem to ever go indoors, Victoria comments, which is interesting because I think that's true, but we haven't seen that. And what's interesting is Nursery's power seems to be something that is like strongly advantaged indoors, although it definitely seems to be able to work outside. But it's interesting because they have like one of them has an indoor synergy, one of them has an outdoor power, and maybe I guess between the two they cover all the bases.
Yeah, and I wonder if that's why he doesn't go inside, right? That it's just like it's too much of a risk to go fuck with the places her power's filling up, or if there's some other very specific Lord of Loss reason for that. I suspect we're gonna find out more about this guy.
Yeah, I mean, as we're talking, I'm just like maybe it's just because he's enormous. Like maybe it's that simple.
Yeah. All his forms are very, very big.
Yeah.
Sounds like somebody's compensating for something.
Exactly. I mean, that's such a Shard thing to do. So Victoria has a skirmish with a human air hockey puck dressed as a Power Ranger, who she's able to defeat with the trickery inherent in having a large invisible autonomous force field, plus the ability to fly and thus control the cape's momentum. She comments that this cape reminds her of her mom in terms of how they fight and what their power is.
Yeah, because her mom turns into that sphere, ball of light, right? Yeah.
Yeah, right. So she's caught off guard by the wretch reminding her of the asylum again, something that she hasn't really been plagued with that much recently.
Yeah, and it caught me off guard too, because we haven't seen her like dive into this a little bit too. And looking back at this and knowing how the rest of the chapter goes out, I mean, did you think this was, Rain aura hitting her? Like she gets hit by Rain's aura several times throughout this chapter. And this is one that she doesn't specifically recognize as Rain. But it seems like how suddenly it comes and how different it is from her normal, from how lately she's been dealing with the wretch. It seems to me that this could be aura generated.
That did not occur to me, but I think you're absolutely right in retrospect. I think that's true. So like as this fight kind of commences, I can't help but notice that the team has when they split up the teams, they've put all of the multi-trigger and or cape with multiple power people on the same team. I may be missing someone, but like Victoria's got like 3 powers. It's something that we don't, she's not a multi-trigger, but she kind of has that weird Dallin family thing going on. Mm-hmm. Rain's a multi-trigger. Foil's a multi-trigger. It's just I'm wondering if like that seems actually kind of imbalanced. Like you crammed like a ton of useful utility powers into this one team. I don't know. It's just kind of something that occurred to me.
Yeah, well, I think it fits the idea that they talked about last week, which was we couldn't really dole these team assignments out based on how powers mesh, how things work together. We have to do it based on who's going to possibly kill who. Yeah,
exactly. Yeah, no, I mean, I guess that was almost my conclusion is like they accidentally made one super team.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Which could be good for their continued survival because they're surrounded and outnumbered. But if this 3-pronged pincer attack is happening on one of their other teams, that's bad.
Yeah, I agree. Precisely. Yeah.
Especially since the Tattletale team, I'm trying to remember who's on that one, but that's one's their entire role in that thing was to just gather information, just to like scope out and gather information. So they're not in a like cape battle kind of formation at all.
Yeah. Yep. Exactly right. Yep. So Chastity nails Mr. Ricochet with a blast of distilled defeat, which kind of takes him out of commission. We learn that she can take several people out of the fight this way, but if she gets herself taken down a peg, which is vague, then all the effects break and then she gets a big backlash.
So I mentioned this before, but I'm going to say it again. Out of the two of us, you're always going to be the powers nerd, right? Like you much more enjoy getting into like the nerdy nitty gritty of how the powers work, whereas I prefer to get more in depth with other equally nerdy things. But to take on your role for a second right here, I continue to love how powers are constructed in this universe. We get this chastity power, which on the surface seems amazing, right? It's this I win button. It's like I touch you and I win. You're done. But then we layer on all the natural limitations of this power. First of all, you have to touch them, so you have to be able to get close enough to touch them. Second of all, anything happens to you in the course of the fight, you could risk, like, if you get hurt, if you're seen as less powerful. You're right that it's kind of vague here, but everything you've done is immediately reversed and you're useless now. So we keep getting, like, there are so many powers in the story now. We've had so many characters and so many different powers. And even as we bring new ones up, invent new ones and bring them into the story, they're always built in with these wonderful, realistic feeling limitations that make sense both in you're writing a story and you can't just make a character that's all powerful because it like ruins everything in your story, but also in universe limitations because the whole story behind why these powers exist is, hey, you guys, here's some stuff. Fight each other with it, and we want to see what happens.
Right. Yeah. I mean, this one in particular works great because it is basically incentivizing her to, if a fight starts, she has to keep going until the fight is over, right?
Yeah.
Because otherwise it's going to be much worse for her. Like, yeah, just basically go full aggro because you can't even surrender. I love that being taken down a peg is actually vague. Like I like that it's vague because it doesn't mean that she gets hit in the face necessarily. It can mean that, like, I mean, we don't know what it means. It could really mean anything at this point, but for all we know, it means that, like, she just appears to lose or to be insulted or something.
I mean, it could mean that the momentum of the overall battle just swings so widely in the other direction that she doesn't even seem like a threat anymore, right?
Yeah.
Like that it could be something as easy as that. And that's really interesting.
Yeah. I like that.
So there's one more thing here that I wanted to draw attention to before we move on. I don't know if I have much to say about it, but so after she does this, she says to Victoria, "You're going to need to protect me," she said, waggling her hand in my general direction, the glowing fingernail in focus, which is like a cool thing that, like, I guess the fingernails track how many people are under the effect of her power.
I think so, yeah.
So she can, like, keep track, like, so she'll know if it breaks. Then, like she was just now remembering, and I'm going to need to protect Precipice. So,
Yeah.
I mean, like, it's kind of weird, right? And I saw some theories going around. You know the truth of Precipice's power that we get, like, cliffhangered at the end of this chapter. But before the chapter came out, I was seeing some, conversations going around that maybe, like, one of Rain's power is to, like, make people like him, which would kind of be the opposite of how Rain seems to operate generally. And this is, I think, an indication of how that might be true. I don't really think that, but I love that little beat at the end there.
Yeah, I mean, my read on it, I mean, just, no spoilers, just my read at the time was just like, I thought this was a callback to her kind of, like, anime attitude of, like, love is the most important thing.
Yeah.
And like, that's all this was. It's just her basically coming down on the decision that, like, maybe she felt ambivalent about him for a minute, but she is actually ultimately going to protect him.
Yeah, I have to get you to the person that you love.
Yeah, exactly. So, fight. Victoria engages with Lord Vloss, and she thinks he seems stronger. Like, his changer forms are less restricted. Like, he's like a mass of arms with clawed hands, which are apparently capable of extruding lances, which is just kind of a gobbledygook mess of, like, utilitarian things that he's put together. It's not like, oh, it's a centaur, which is what he was at the other fight.
Yeah, he's definitely been leveling up. somewhere.
Yeah.
But the interesting thing about this is we've like revealed this truth about him, this dorky truth, and it's almost as like the book wants you to go between not being able to take him seriously and also being like awed by his power, because that's kind of where I'm at. Like, he's very serious and scary here, but he probably also named himself Lord of Lost, so his initials would be LOL.
Yeah.
Like, that's probably something that happened. And it's just like, I love that kind of dichotomy between these two versions of him we've seen.
Yeah, right. I mean, he's really strong. Like
yeah.
I mean, I like his implementation as an antagonist in this story, because he's actually somebody who it would be really hard for, pretty much, like Victoria is almost perfectly suited to be a cape who can fight him, but not. What am I trying to say here? Like, most capes can't hurt him at all. Most capes can't take a hit from him. Victoria can take a hit from him, but not very many. And she can hurt him, but not very much. So it's a perfect sort of antagonist for like a brute like her. It's like, oh yeah, you're a brute who can hit hard and who can take a hit. Well, your antagonist is a brute who can hit harder and who can take way more hits.
Yeah.
I don't know if I'm being clear here, but like, this is a well-crafted opponent for her. What I'm getting at.
I agree. And we have to, you know, put his, like, he's a successful mercenary because he's never been defeated, right? Mm-hmm. Like, he's loyal to these people, and he can be loyal in his job because he knows, like, he wins almost every time. Like, he doesn't, like, it's a lot easier to be loyal and not be bought off by someone with more money if you're pretty confident that in any kind of conflict situation you're gonna end up on top by the nature of how fucking powerful you are. Yeah. And that's the type of person he sees. Like, it's easy to be in that position when you know it. And that kind of leads us into this conversation where she like tries to attack him on the morality front. Like, she's not trying to fight him physically, and they have this whole like mini morality conversation in the middle of the chapter here. And I wanted to zoom in and focus on this, and we're not going to read the whole thing because it's very long. But I really wanted to like talk about this and what this is saying, right? Because we have this moment where she's basically saying, like, look at the people you're working for. They tore people apart but left them alive and stole pieces of them, so you can't even put them back together. And Lord of Lost is like, yeah, well, you like pulverized Valefor's jaw. And she's like, yeah, but he was bad. Which, yeah, he was. But like, to a mercenary, it's like, look, you take out the people that are working against you by whatever means necessary. Like, in his mind, that's just what you do.
Right. Yeah, he's basically looking at the acts in isolation and not like whether they were justified. Yeah.
And my most favorite of his lines here, which is like true amorality in every meaning of the word, is my line gets drawn when I'm hired. I can't quit a job partway through. I consider things after. So it's just like he has no moral compass, really. It's just, if you want me to do it, I'm going to do it. And yeah, maybe I'll think about it after the fact, but that's useless in any kind of morality situation.
Yeah, but I think this is a fantastic thing to once again, a fantastic thing to pit against Victoria, because her whole life, or the whole story at least, has been her struggling to find her line. Like what is the line? Where should the line be drawn? She has her decision flow chart of like where the moral compass should come from, and reach out to other people, consult what the law says, what does society say about this, what does my heart say about this, what do my loved ones who've died, like what would they say about this, and just constantly struggling to try to honor everything that she thinks should be honored when it comes down to drawing where is the line, what is right and wrong, and trying to be as scrupulous as she possibly can. And here's this guy coming along saying, hey, you're making it too hard for yourself, Victoria. You just draw the line, and whoever hires you to do the thing, they're right, and the thing that's right is to do the thing they hired you to do. It's really easy. I don't know why you're making it so complicated.
Right. And I mean, a lot of the story is she's a cop, right? I mean, at the end of the day, that's what Victoria is. She's a cop figure. She's like not legally, but she believes in law enforcement. Yeah, she like and this is the story of the cop, you know, getting out there on the streets and learning about like what the real world is like, and that you know, young idealistic view of right and wrong is being attacked and prodded from different people with different ideas of what right and wrong is. And people that I don't find Lord of Lost's argument here very convincing. I think this is actually almost like worse than anything else, because like being amoral literally means that it doesn't matter like at all. Like you are capable of doing anything, and that's horrifying and terrible. But I mean, he is like poking and prodding her at her weakest part of which is how she is deciding to draw the lines. At the thing that is most confused and unsure about her right now is, where do I draw the lines? You've got to draw the line, Lord of Law, she says, and is like, yeah, I know, but you do that too. Like, look, there's a line between playing fair and destroying your enemies, and you've crossed it in the past, and like. It doesn't matter that it was totally justified. It's Valefor. He's terrible. You had to take him out in a way that like makes it so he can't use his power on you. So like smashing his jaw open was understandable there. But like, I think it's just, we're seeing Victoria's copness get attacked by the realities of existence. And that's always fascinating.
Yeah. I mean, I think both of them are maybe not exactly, but sort of gesturing at this idea of the cops and robbers game when they're talking about the line. And the line that Victoria crossed when she smashed his jaw was the like, okay, you're no longer playing cops and robbers right now. You are taking out your enemy with excessive force. Yeah. And he's saying like, yeah, I mean, you've broken those rules before. And she's like, yeah, sometimes you have to break the rules. I mean, that's understood. And I don't know. I like that his worldview is coherent to him, but like impervious to her kind of logic, and like vice versa, where she's like, you're a hypocrite, and he's like, not from my point of view. So yeah,
right. I think he has a clearer understanding of his worldview than she does of hers, and it's because hers is bogged in this gray uncertainty that she's going through right now. Yeah, and I think it's very difficult for a person who's having trouble deciding what the right thing to do in this world of difficult choices, because it goes up against someone who has absolutely no problems deciding what the right thing to do is, because the right thing to do in their mind is whatever you're paying me to do.
Yeah. All right. Yeah. I mean, I hope we develop that more, actually, you know?
Yeah.
So
I think so.
So the team tries to evacuate on Perion's spider with Perion herself slung over it, mostly incapacitated except for her power.
Which, that's like she's like a big deal in this fight, even though she's like totally taken out. Like there's threads everywhere blocking off people, and like for being someone who just got a giant fetus ripped out of their throat, she's doing pretty good, Matt.
Yeah. I like that someone I don't even remember where pointed out that I don't remember her using threads this way.
Yeah, that seems new.
Back in Worm, but this actually seems like an innovation that she might have picked up from Taylor specifically, using spider webs, using threads. As they flee, the area is increasingly overcome with Nursery's power around them, and the unpowered mercenaries try to hem them in. Victoria's role becomes just fending off Lord of Lost's attacks as he switches between forms, trying to find a way around her to get to the other teammates. Rain, at one point, is able to signal her using his emotions power and trusting her to interpret what he's doing. And then the two of them coordinate so that she strikes him just as Rain nails Lord of Lost with the blades.
Which is really fucking smart, Matt. Like this is really inventive on Rain's part. He comes up with this idea to signal her this way, and then he executes on it, trusting that she'll know what he means. And she does. She picks up on it really quick, and it works. This team up between the two of them force Lord of Lost into various forms to counteract them, and gets them the closest to actually defeating him that probably anyone has ever gotten.
Yeah, it's a fantastic team up where like she's strong but not really strong enough to damage him, but when coupled with his power, she is, and it's just a really cool power synergy that, I mean, we've sort of seen a lesser form of it several times where like he'll weaken something and then she'll smash through it. But this is using it in combat against an opponent, which is awesome.
Yeah.
So this new cape comes in, a blaster capable of creating a wide variety of effects, and they kind of hold the team at bay and kind of put them in a corner. Victoria struggles as she remembers the crawler situation, and this kind of like flicker back to horrible things that happened to her has been caused by Rain, and she interprets it as him signaling again, and she attacks Lord of the Lost again in concert with Rain's blades. And this basically causes Lord of the Lost to break apart, emerging this time in his flying form. And then she smashes into him, and when she does it, she sees what is probably his core.
Yeah. So second beat of aura-driven coordination between the two of them, right? The first one establishes it. The second confirms that this is a general strategy that they're using going forward and not just this one-time thing. This is effective working communication, and they're succeeding. Good job, Rain. As soon as this fight's going to end, Victoria's probably going to go up to Rain and be like, wow, man, really good use of your power. Like, I understand you're still getting a feel of this thing, but good job because you communicated efficiently and we worked together. She's going to give him a real pat on the back, right? Right, Matt?
Yeah, no, I don't think so. So as we move forward, I like how we're kind of continuing to table set, but in a way that is not obtrusive, because we learned that Aroa's power is to hit people. She hits them with it, and then it makes them like pain.
Kinky.
So I can't wait to see how that manifests in the fight.
Yeah.
So as Lord of the Lost flies toward the ground, aiming to rip open the earth and let Nursery's flesh minions out, Victoria and Rain team up to quickly cut apart a construction crane, and then she uses the hook to like impale him and to steer him, and it kind of works. She kind of diverts his course, but also Victoria hits the ground really hard and is completely dazed.
Yeah. I like this because like Victoria just like points at the crane to Rain, and then like he throws the blade and it hits the wrong part first, and then she's like exasperated and like, come on, and then just points again, and the second time he actually gets what she's meaning, even though like she just like, can you imagine just like a big crane up there and you're just like, and then like you don't immediately know exactly what I want you to do. It's like so everything works out kind of, but then she yells at him.
Yeah, she gets increasingly impatient with him. And she's saying, while we're assessing what to do and what not to do, precipice. Sorry, he said, panic. If it was a toy gun or a toy, I'd take it away from you. I said, it almost fucked me up when I tried to lasso him.
Yeah, so basically what happens is like she's got the thing around him and suddenly gets hit with this power again. Or she's got the thing around Lord of Lost and suddenly like gets hit by the power, and it almost like causes her enough doubt where she messes up, and so she's really fucking pissed off at him, and it's like he should have known that if the Heartbroken's power didn't work on Lord of Lost, then how was his gonna work? Which I'm not clear of the geography of the battle, but like that was something that I think it was it Candy that just communicated that just to Victoria? Like, I'm not sure if you can assume that Rain would have been told that.
Yeah.
But also, like, he just used the power in a creative, effective way twice to coordinate with her. And then all she focuses on is ripping him down for the one time he, quote unquote, made a mistake, which he might not have even been aware of, that was a mistake, that it wasn't going to work.
Yeah.
Which, like, it just kind of drives me crazy because I understand she's trying to coach him and she's trying to improve him, and I get that. But I just think like yelling at Rain is not the type of personality who like yelling at him is a way to improve himself. Like that, like there are people that yelling at is a very effective coaching method. Like there are a lot of people in sports that have like nasty, mean coaches like effectively motivate them, like Whiplash, right? But not all people are like that. Not all people are motivated by anger or dismissive rudeness.
Yeah.
And I don't think Rain is one of those people. So I don't think this is the right tact for him.
No, well, I don't think this is a strategy on her part. I think I mean, every time he's used the power on her, she's mad at him. And I think it's pretty simply, she's angry at what he makes her feel. He always makes her feel, he reminds her of the crawler situation. He reminds her of being in the hospital. She hates that. It hurts. She's lashing out. I mean, this is not like, this is not her being like, I'm being the cape coach. She's just like, you are hurting me in a way that is like my number one button, and I'm super pissed about it. I mean, it's really interesting to see how this chapter ends in light of that.
Yeah.
So I guess we'll just get there.
Yeah, let's do it.
So before that happens, Candy manages to hit Nursery with happiness oversaturation, which knocks her back a bit, but not really out of the fight. It doesn't really reduce the effect of her power on the area. The team is still stuck in her hostile terrain, and Lord of Loss is still smashing up the area to release more of the flesh tongues. And they're still surrounded by mercenaries. So
what you're saying is things are going really well for our team.
Yeah, things are going great. I mean, yeah, so this is a great chapter because they've been like fighting bitterly in this horrible environment, and it basically ends like, if anything, worse than when it started out.
Yeah.
But somewhere in the midst of this, Victoria has a brainwave based on her repeated exposure to Rain's power. And she says, I think I get how your power is really supposed to work. I said, mine? Rain asked. Who else? I asked. Listen carefully, because whether I'm right or wrong, this is going to suck.
So first of all, we have to mention that this is a delicious troll from the author of this book on the secret Parian powers, right? Because
it didn't even occur to me. Oh my God.
Well, no, the sentence right before this is she's talking about Parian. So like right before this, I think I get how your power is really supposed to work. She's looking at Parian and Parian's dolls. And so this who else here is absolutely a specific reference to that in a wonderful kind of way.
I feel so dumb. Yeah. Teasing us. That's great.
This would be the part where I normally say, hey, Matt, what do you think the secret power is? But you've read the chapter already, so you know. So I can't ask you that. I guess you can ask me.
Yeah.
But I don't really have an answer. Like, I mean, obviously it's something to do with his emotion power. It's an aspect of his power that she's realized a strategy of. I don't know, like, if it's something to do with like doubt or guilt. I don't like guilting you into behaving better would fit very well with Rain's, whole modus operandi, that his guilt is driving him to become a better person. So something, I don't know.
Yeah. I mean, I can just remember what my guess was, which is that, it actually, and I'm basing this off of the fact that her description of what it makes her feel was actually didn't sound exactly the same as what he described it as. So I was like, maybe it actually makes everyone feel something different. Yeah. And it's different in a way that is beneficial to them in some way. But that was kind of as far as I got. I'm not going to comment on whether that was, right or wrong or partially right or whatever.
Yeah, that's fine.
That was kind of my guess.
I do like that she phrased it here as, I get how your power is really supposed to work. And I wonder if that's the truth. Like if like she's discovered like the real use of his power, or she's just discovered a way to take his power and use it towards her advantage.
Interesting.
And like, cause that, I mean, that's in her mind what the real use of the power would be. So I don't know. We'll find out next week, but yeah, I mean, I think that's a fun way to end the chapter. We're like, whether I'm right or wrong, this is going to suck. So, I mean, that's what makes me think it's going to be like, use your power on me a lot, because if it works the way I think it is, it'll give me an advantage, but it's going to suck. If it doesn't work the way I think it is, it won't give me an advantage and will also suck. So that's what makes me think it's going to be like, use your power on me and I'm going to find a way to take advantage of it. And the idea of like guilt being a driving force or a learning force is interesting to me and is very on brand for Rain. So
yeah, it makes sense. All right. So now at the end of the podcast, here is the community spotlight where we discuss what people wrote in response to the discussion question last week.
This feels so weird, Matt. I look at our time.
It's super weird.
I look at our time and I'm like, oh, we're only an hour and a half into the podcast. And I was like, oh, wait a minute. We still got this whole thing to do at the end.
Yeah. It feels right though, somehow.
It does.
So The question last week was, what is the healthiest cape relationship in the Parahuman saga? Go ahead. Sorry.
All right, so first up, we have Landis963, who says, knowing our author, the healthiest cape relationships are probably the ones that are off-screen mostly, which means Dragon and Defiant or Shamrock and Gregor. Just a general note, I think here, Dragon and Defiant was by far the most popular choice for this question, which I think makes a lot of sense. They at least seem to be in a relatively healthy relationship at the end of Worm, and so it's one of the things that jumped into my head first when I read about this question. But not everyone fully agreed on this, right? Because I think there were some comments in the thread about people that are kind of concerned about, like, we left their relationship where Defiant had made this choice to release Dragon by destroying this other, the Pandora it was, right?
Yeah.
And we don't really know what's happened since then, the consequences of that. We've seen them very tangentially in the story so far. We've not really got an experience of how things are going, right? So this is kind of a big unknown in the story so far.
Yeah. I see why people give this answer, though.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. Hero of Old Iron lists Numberman and Citrine, and they say, yeah, they're both horrible people, but from the way Citrine talks about the Number Boys and how they treat her, it seems fairly obvious that Kurt does actually like her. It's a little hard to read her perspective, but I'm pretty sure she does appreciate him in the same way or a very similar way.
Yeah, and I think the secret trick of this question, Matt, is not who is the healthiest cape relationship that exists among 100% good people.
Yeah.
Which is not really what we were going for here, which I think lines up right with Calerno's answer as well, because they say Victor and Othala, the two members of Empire 88 from Worm. They point out that Tattletale is trying to tear them apart, only to be temporarily stymied by the fact that they actually possess basic communication skills. There are still weaknesses that are there that Tattletale managed to exploit, of course, because she's Tattletale, but I appreciate that they're a couple that came together for unusual reasons, have realistic problems, and have talked about them and are willing to come to mature solutions and compromises. Too bad they're Nazis.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure Othala's dead, too.
Yeah. But I like these answers, though, because, there was some pushback on this one specifically. It was like, no, they can't be in a healthy relationship. They're Nazis. They're monsters. And I don't disagree with the fact that they're Nazis and therefore bad people. But it is true also that they had a pretty good communication system going on there, right?
Yeah.
And that's the question is that's the central question to this. If you are bad people, is your relationship healthy? How does that work? What's the dividing line there? And that's kind of what I was hoping to explore with this question. So I'm glad people pick people like this.
Yeah. No, because ultimately you've smuggled in a question of what is a healthy relationship.
Right. Exactly.
That's what the question is secretly. And people get to expound on what they think it is by choosing a pair and then saying why. Lude Calamari chooses Foil and Farian. Foil and Parian. They clearly love one another and take care of each other's well-being. Foil's scream in the recent chapter echoing Parian's when she believed Foil to have been caught in a Grey Boy loop. It had a somewhat rocky start, with Foil basically pledging herself to Parian when it seemed like Parian's own issues with relationships in the past were going to overcome the attempt. But it's clearly evolved into something much more healthy and mutual, the two easily sharing spaces and comforting one another. There are some potential issues with the two being capes brushing with death regularly and their relationship obligating Foil to be a villain, but it only seems to extend to her passive-aggressive sniping at Tattletale, the two otherwise serving as a moral compass for the larger team. And Lude Calamari also touches on Scion and Eden as the perfect relationship, and that's something that'd be fun to talk about. They're literally two halves of the same whole.
Yeah, there you go. They're perfect. They counter each other in every way because that's how they're designed to.
Mm-hmm.
Of course, that ends in one of their horrible deaths and then both of their horrible deaths. So, relationships, they're tough.
On the one hand, they're designed to be the perfect counterpart, but you could also, you could with equal accuracy say the same things about male and female human, like evolution designed them to be the perfect match. It's no, that's not really how it's worked out for us.
True.
So,
True.
It's messier than that, actually.
Yeah, I like the Foil and Parian question though, and that gets me into our next answer here, which is Ferdine, who basically disagrees. Like they said that they want to say Foil and Parian because they like them a lot, but is really concerned about their relationship and reads some kind of hesitation in about the relationship when Parian is talking to Victoria in one of our latest chapters. And I like that because like there is some tension between the Foil Parian relationship and their continued involvement with the Undersiders, right?
Yeah.
Parian kind of chose to go this way, and Foil in her love of Parian followed her down this path, and both of them are kind of uncomfortable being on this path, and I think that's bringing tension to the relationship as they continue to be a part of this group that they're neither is very sure if they want to belong in anymore, and that puts a lot of pressure on your relationship with each other when you're unhappy in your environmental situation.
Yeah, I mean, my guess based purely on psychological projection would be that they're like in that kind of relationship detente where they've maybe talked about it, maybe not talked about it, but they kind of both know that Foil's unhappy with the situation, but that Parian's not going to budge.
Yeah.
And so Foil is just venting by passive aggressively sniping at Tattletale, as was mentioned. And this is not like a stable solution to the problem. It's a we're going to just not talk about this because that would just lead to a fight. And nobody's going to budge, so we're just going to both be unhappy about how things are. Yeah,
it's kind of like, I mean, one member of the relationship gave up their career, quote unquote, for the other one, right? Mm-hmm. And that's a very kind choice. It happens all the time in relationships in real life that one person makes a choice to support the other in the things that they're chasing. But if you don't communicate about that, if you don't make your feelings about things and your struggles with that thing known and shared within the relationship, it can lead to problems. And I think you're right that they were kind of low key seeing that between them, and it could end up with a splinter in their relationship, which would make me very sad because I like the two of them very much.
Yeah. Well, it's worth pointing out. I mean, the reason we asked this question, right, was that this is the relationships arc.
Yes.
So yeah, it's this is where we've seen some friction between the two of them for the first time, maybe, or not between the two of them, but surrounding their relationship.
Yeah.
Sarah Penguin says that they're having a difficult time picking between Parian and Foil and Side Piece and Disjoint because they're both healthy for the same reason, communication and support. When Foil asks Parian out, she is apprehensive and says she can't be with someone who wants to own her. And Foil responds by letting Parian control the speed of the relationship. So the foundation of the relationship is one person expressing their needs and boundaries and the other hearing and respecting that. Then throughout Worm, we see them look out for each other and support each other. Side Piece and Disjoint are the same. They can communicate with each other openly, and even if they don't agree, they can still hear what the other person has to say. Also, Parian and Side Piece have a similar romantic history before their current relationship, even if the way they responded was very different. They both had people who weren't interested in them as a person and only wanted sex, and are now with people who want more than sex.
I liked that connection between the two relationships a lot, that they're now with different kind of people.
Yeah. There's an interesting connection, although I wouldn't say that they're the same type.
No, not at all.
Something worth pointing out. Yeah.
Sure. And yeah, I mean, I'd kind of forgotten briefly until I read this question about the idea that, when they started this relationship, Parian had a lot of trauma from past relationships, and the idea of not being in control of the relationship was something that made her feel very uncomfortable, and Foil kind of completely acquiesced to that, which, yes, I completely agree. That's a very healthy, kind, caring thing to do to a person that you really care about a lot. But, while that is something you can easily do the first 6 months, a year of the relationship, you fast forward 2, 3, 4 years down the road, and you're still completely acquiescing and completely letting the other person control every aspect of your relationship because of their very understandable fear of losing control. That can get a little frustrating, I think.
Yeah, I mean, I think that it's just a fact about humans that if you're the kind of person who is okay with the other person making decisions in general, that can actually lead to resentment over the long term, just the way you described.
I completely agree. Yeah. Hope that's not the case here. Hope not. But it's certainly possible. All right. And finally here we have Kausubalu, who actually says Victoria and Dean are the strongest relationship in the Parahumans universe. It seems like Victoria and Dean had a pretty healthy relationship. It's a bit of a cheat, though, because of course Victoria is looking through rose-tinted glasses, but we've seen enough to know that they clearly cared about each other. They had fights without them ruining their relationship, and they supported each other when they were able to do so. I completely agree with that, and I do 100% agree that this is a very manipulated opinion through the lens of our main character. I think Victoria and Dean's relationship is going to be something that we're going to continue to explore throughout the story. We've cut back to it many times, and we've cut back to it, and we've seen, when we talked about, we've seen the cracks in the picture of what this relationship was. I think we're going to see it was a much more complicated relationship than Victoria made it out to be. But that doesn't mean it wasn't a healthy relationship. Complicated is not always necessarily bad. It's realistic. Like, all relationships are complicated. Yeah. That's how it works.
Well, I mean, I guess that comes down to the question of, like, I guess people can mean different things. Because like, I personally, if they're having these like explosive fights where they don't talk to each other for 2 weeks, and that happens more than once or twice or 3 times, to me, that looks pathological to me from the outside.
Yeah.
So that would be my like I don't know about that. But I mean, you could also just be like, yeah, but they're in high school. Kids in high school are ridiculous.
Right. I mean, that's the other thing. How long did they date? I was trying to remember that. I should have looked that up.
I want to say 2 years is the number that pops into my head.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I don't want to completely dismiss the feelings of young people in high school and the feelings that they're having, but it's also, they're very different kinds of feelings, right?
Well, like, and not just the feelings, but like you don't have the life experience to not just be a bull in a china shop with the execution of those feelings. So you're just gonna cause a lot of unnecessary pain, and that's like inevitable. There's no way around it. Yeah. So like I don't want to hold it against them that they were young. I guess I'm just pointing out, like, hey, if I'm having screaming matches and not talking to my significant other for 2 weeks at a time, that's a bad sign.
Yeah. I mean, my fights with my wife end in about 2 minutes of silence, because I'm like, I'm sorry.
Yeah. Right.
I was always the person that says sorry first, just because that's who I am. Yeah. My mom said that, like, if I ever did something wrong, the first thing I'd be like, I'm sorry.
Yeah. It's just, I mean, I don't know. I think maybe you and I are similar in this way. Like, it's just not worth it to me to have strife. I'm just like, let's everything be okay and happy, and we'll just Anyway,
the thing I do is, like, I need to be mad right now. Like, I need to go away and be mad, but I'll only be mad for like 5 minutes, and then I'll come back and be like, okay, I'm done being mad now. Let's talk through this.
Right. Yeah, I think that's healthy, Scott. I think that's a healthy relationship.
I think so too. The best relationship is mine. There we go. That's my answer.
That's my answer too.
I'm kidding. Of course, I would not declare myself that. I think my wife and I have a good relationship. It's not a perfect relationship, but I think we're doing pretty good.
Yeah. Well, that's it for this discussion questions. Now, the question for next week will be: choose an emotional manipulation power in Parahumans and discuss what the power says about the character who possesses it. I like this question a lot. I think this is one of those very intentionally open-ended questions. Take whoever you want and go nuts with it. Yeah. And, I mean, obvious ties into what we discussed this week, but that I want to use that as a springboard to talk about in general how Wildbow does this, specifically with the emotional manipulation powers, right? Like, we've had plenty of conversations over time about, like, the clever literary way in which he uses powers, but I just want to talk about specifically emotional manipulation. All right, that's all we got for you this week on We've Got Ward. You guys are all part of this show, so feel free to provide us with advice, questions, or thoughts on this week's reading. You can reach out to us via email at gotwormpod@gmail.com or over on our Twitter account at gotwormpod. My personal Twitter is at scottdaily85, and Matt's is at emotional manipulation mordinamail. That's right. If you're not already subscribed to We've Got Ward, we strongly recommend you do so and never miss an episode. You can find us on iTunes, Stitcher, YouTube, Google Play, and pretty much anywhere else in the world you can listen to podcasts.
And as always, you can find this and all the other shows we do over at doofmedia.com. Our schedule this week got all screwed up because I was sick all week. So no other shows besides Worm this week. It just didn't work out for us. But we will be back next week with all kinds of new stuff, all of our new shows. So yeah, go to doofmedia.com and check out all those different shows.
Yeah. And if you like any of those shows and you want to support them, consider donating to our Patreon, patreon.com/doofmedia. You can donate $1 a month or whatever else you can afford. Supporting us on Patreon gives you tons of great bonuses like voting in our quarterly fan art contests and our yearly costume contest, Q&A sessions with me and Scott, access to live streams of our recording sessions, and our excellent Discord chat. And speaking of Patreon, special thanks to new Bidoofs, Axel, Aisling C, Sam, and Eric V, and Anisha P, all at the $1 level. That's awesome. A whole bunch of folks this week who I hope to see all of you on the Discord and we can hang out.
Yes.
And Doof Troop member Nuke Noodles upgraded to the $10 level. Thanks so much. That's awesome.
Yeah, thanks, guys.
And as always, of course, make sure you go over to Wildbow's Patreon, patreon.com/Wildbow, and donate to him as well, because this is his world. We're just playing in it.
And if you cannot afford to donate right now, that is absolutely okay. As always, please don't donate if you don't if you can't afford it. We love the support you guys give us. We absolutely love it, but we don't want to stress you guys out financially. So there's tons of other ways you can help us out. You can just share the podcast, spread the word. We don't do marketing, guys. We're looking into possibly finding a way to do some marketing, but we don't do any of it right now. So we kind of rely completely on word of mouth from you guys. So you can help us out by sharing the podcast. You can help us out by going over to Apple Podcasts and leaving us a rating and a review. This week's Spotlight review comes from Oren M. from Israel, who gives us 5 stars and says, really awesome. Highly recommend for anyone who enjoys Worm. So short but sweet 5-star review from Oren in Israel. Thank you so much. Thank you all of you guys who take the time to give us those rating and reviews. We say this every week, but that's because it's true every week. It really does help us. It makes the podcast look more legit. The more reviews you have on iTunes, the better you look, the more interested people are you, the higher the chance for you to appear on the charts goes up. It's not just based on downloads. It really should just be based on downloads, but it's not. It's based on a number of new reviews every week. So it really does help us out, and we appreciate you guys taking the time to do that. And I love how international the Parahumans community is, and our little podcast community is. We have several listeners from Israel, and it's just really cool. I've never known people from Israel before.
Yeah, me neither. One thing I don't think I've ever really said at this part of the show is like, also thank you to those of you who do just like mention our show on Reddit when people are talking about, Parahumans, or mention it to other people who they know enjoy Worm, like in person, and just say, hey, maybe you like this. Like, just anybody who has recommended our show, I like every time I see that or hear about it, I really appreciate it, and I'm really thankful for you all. Yeah.
I completely agree. I love it. We see those new threads pop up in the Reddit all the time. Just finished Worm, wanted to give you guys my thoughts, which I love that this community exists and that happens in the community, that like every week there's like 2 or 3, just finished the book, I need to talk about it with someone things. Yeah. And it warms my heart that you go into those threads and you see people, great, now listen to this podcast about it. I think about doing that stuff myself, but like it always feels weird to self-promote, like it's always this kind of uncomfortable thing, especially on Reddit. Like self-promotion on Reddit is pretty frowned upon. So it just means so much to us that we don't have to worry about the icky feeling about doing that, because we have such loyal listeners that will do that for us. So yeah, it really, really helps. Yeah.
Yeah. Like you said, it's absolutely heartwarming, and just makes me feel great that people would think like, oh, you know what will enhance your experience of Worm is this podcast. I'm like, wow, that's incredibly flattering to me.
So absolutely.
Thanks for that. Well, that's all we got for you this week, and we'll be back next week with some more of Arc 11 Blinding.
I hope we get more nursery grossness.
Me too.
You already know.